When I finally looked in the mirror, I was shocked. A softer, more vulnerable face stared back at me, one that felt new but also strangely familiar. My confidence grew with each step. I slipped into one of the delicate outfits I had purchased, a silky matching set that felt impossibly soft against my skin, and then tried on a simple black velvet dress. It was more form-fitting than I expected, and walking in heels for the first time was clumsy and awkward. But after a few minutes of practice, I was swaying across the room naturally, just as I'd seen confident women do so many times before. I stopped in front of the mirror again. For the first time in my life, I didn't just look different, I felt different. Softer. Freer. And most importantly, more myself. With 2 hours left before my appointment with Miss Rachel, I sat down to relax and watch some television. I distracted myself by attaching a set of long red press-on nails I'd bought. It was strangely satisfying and surreal to sit there watching daytime TV while admiring the polished red tips of my hands. As the time approached, I grew more and more nervous. I checked my reflection repeatedly, fixing tiny details here and there. Then, 40 minutes before I was due online, I realized something. I needed a feminine voice. I couldn't just sound like myself while presenting this new version of me. It took some practice. At first, my attempts sounded ridiculous, squeaky and cartoonish. But slowly, I found a softer, more natural tone that I could sustain. I read aloud from a magazine, practicing until I could speak for 2 full minutes without slipping back into my old voice. By the time I finished, I was trembling, a mix of fear, excitement, and anticipation. This wasn't just dress up anymore. This was the beginning of a transformation I'd dreamed about for years. And now I was only minutes away from showing Miss Rachel and myself who I truly was. Finally, the moment arrived. My heart was racing as I clicked the button to turn my webcam on. The screen flickered for a few seconds, and then her image appeared, and my breath caught in my throat. Miss Rachel was even more striking than I'd imagined. She looked to be in her late 20s, with shoulder-length blonde hair, piercing green eyes, and a calm, confident smile that somehow felt both welcoming and intimidating at the same time. She was dressed elegantly in a fitted red wrap dress, and behind her I could see a bright garden through a set of French windows. Then she smiled directly into the camera, directly at me, and in that instant I knew I would do almost anything to please her. "Welcome, my dear," she said, her voice smooth and refined, carrying the unmistakable tone of someone from southern England. I had always imagined she was American. The idea that she might live only a few miles away made my heart pound even harder. I stumbled over my words at first. Thank you, miss. I'm sorry I kept you waiting." "No, dear," she replied gently, "you were actually a few seconds early. You're not in trouble. Now, tell me, how did your shopping trip go? You look delightful, by the way. Very pretty." The word pretty made my cheeks flush. I hadn't expected to hear it spoken about me, but hearing it from her made everything feel worthwhile. Encouraged by her warm tone, I began describing everything: the stores I'd visited, the clothes I had bought, and the embarrassing moments I'd endured. She seemed particularly amused when I told her about an older woman who had pointed at me and called me names. "Well, that's what you are now, isn't it?" Miss Rachel said with a teasing smile. "A brave little sissy exploring a new side of yourself." I felt exposed, but strangely liberated too. She asked how all of this was making me feel, and I answered with complete honesty. I told her how I was torn between shame and exhilaration, how, despite the fear and the humiliation, everything about this felt natural. As strange as it sounded, wearing the clothes, the heels, and the makeup felt right. Suddenly, she gave me a new instruction. "On your feet, dear. Let's see how you walk. Remember to sway your hips. Confidence is everything." I hesitated only for a second before obeying. Wobbling slightly in my unfamiliar heels, I walked across the room and back, trying to keep my posture graceful. Just as I reached the camera again, her next command rang out: "Curtsy." Feeling foolish but determined, I dipped into a quick curtsy before sitting down once more. I felt ridiculous. Here I was, hundreds of miles away from her, following commands through a screen. But then I looked back at her image and she was smiling. "Good, Sophie. A very good start. It was as if a light had switched on inside me. The feelings of doubt and embarrassment melted away, replaced by something deeper, the warm glow of knowing I had pleased her. "Thank you, miss," I said softly. "I just want to make you proud." She chuckled lightly. "Don't worry, dear. You will. You have so much potential, and I intend to see you achieve it." After we chatted a while longer, Miss Rachel suggested we move to another online space, a video chat room called Master and Servant where others could join and watch. My earlier nervousness returned almost instantly. Talking to her one-on-one was one thing, but knowing that strangers, dozens of them, might now see me as well, that was something else entirely. Still, I took a deep breath and followed her lead. To my surprise, Miss Rachel introduced me to a few of her friends online and encouraged me to chat with other people like me. It was incredible. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding or pretending. I was surrounded by people who understood exactly how I felt. Some were dressed in elaborate, theatrical outfits. One person wore a ballet-style costume. Another was dressed in a playful, storybook-inspired outfit. Most of them were, like me, exploring their identity and expression in safe, creative ways. A few shared stories about the unique challenges they had faced or the lessons they'd learned along the way. We talked for hours about confidence, mistakes, fears, and the joy that came from embracing who we truly were. One person told me how learning to be themselves had even helped them succeed at work. Another explained that the best advice they could give was simple: do your best to follow the path that feels right, and trust the person guiding you. By the time Miss Rachel came back to check on me, I was relaxed and happy. I hadn't even noticed how much time had passed. We chatted for a little while longer, and then she logged off, but I was left with a sense of excitement I had never felt before. For the first time, I had found a space where I was free to express myself and still feel accepted. It was bittersweet to remove the clothes and makeup I'd been wearing, but the anticipation of seeing her again made everything worth it. She had already given me the date and time of our next session, and I couldn't wait. The following weeks were a whirlwind of discovery. I started prioritizing my self-expression more and more, often rearranging my schedule so I could prepare for my conversations with Miss Rachel. She began setting me small challenges, little exercises designed to build my confidence. One day, she asked me to wear something that reflected my identity underneath my regular clothes, as a private reminder of who I was becoming. Another time, she challenged me to step outside my comfort zone and complete a simple, harmless task to prove how committed I was to this journey. Each task taught me something new about myself. The fears that had once held me back were slowly replaced by curiosity, confidence, and a growing sense of purpose. Miss Rachel continued to guide me, sometimes gently, sometimes firmly, and with each passing day, I found myself more eager to follow her lead. Then, one evening, she surprised me with something new. She asked me to write openly and honestly about my dreams, the ones I had always been too afraid to say out loud. At first, the exercise felt intimidating, even embarrassing. But once I started, the words poured out of me. I shared things about myself I had never admitted to anyone. And when I sent what I had written to Miss Rachel, her response was warm and encouraging. "You're learning to be honest," she told me. And that is the most important step of all. It was true. In just a few short weeks, I had gone from hiding everything about myself to embracing it fully, and I knew this was only the beginning of the journey. Miss Rachel was about to log off when she surprised me with one final instruction. "I've decided you need a proper uniform, Sophie. There's a small boutique I trust in London. They're expecting you tomorrow at 7 p.m. to collect it." She paused and looked directly into the camera, her expression calm but commanding. "To help you get into the right mindset," she continued, "I want you to wear something underneath your regular clothes that reminds you of who you are. It's important that you arrive prepared and confident." My heart raced. This wasn't just about picking up clothes. This was about stepping into a part of myself I had only just begun to explore. She wanted other people to see me, to know who I was becoming. It was a huge leap, and she knew it. I stared back at the screen, nervous but determined. "This will make me very happy, Sophie," she added gently. That was all it took. All the complicated feelings, the fear, the excitement, the overwhelming desire to make her proud, surged to the surface. I nodded without hesitation. "Of course, Miss Rachel," I said quietly. The next afternoon, I boarded a train to London. Even though it was the middle of summer, I wore a zipped-up coat. It was the only way I could hide how self-conscious I felt, knowing I was carrying a piece of my true self underneath my ordinary clothes. People gave me curious glances on the train, but I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, determined not to lose my nerve. When we arrived at Charing Cross Station, I made my way through the busy streets, past Trafalgar Square, and into the winding alleys of Soho. As I walked deeper into the district, the shops changed from familiar storefronts to small, niche boutiques tucked away in narrow side streets. The rain was light, and the damp air felt strangely symbolic, as if the city itself was challenging me to keep going. Finally, I found the shop, a narrow, two-story building squeezed between two larger stores. A curtain hung in place of a door. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The shop was cluttered and dimly lit, boxes stacked high against the walls. A few people browsed the aisles, and behind the counter stood a middle-aged woman with cropped dark hair and a serious expression. As I approached, the customer in front of me finished paying and left. The woman turned her attention to me. Now that the moment had come, admitting who I was to a complete stranger, my nerves returned in full force. I'm here to pick up a package," I stammered. "Miss Rachel sent me." Recognition flickered across her face. "So you're the new student," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I see she's chosen well." Her tone made me blush. A few of the other customers glanced over, clearly amused. My cheeks burned even hotter. "You'll call me Mistress Diane," she added firmly, before turning toward a doorway at the back of the shop. "Molly." A few seconds later, a younger person appeared. They were dressed in a classic uniform, a crisp, coordinated outfit with lace details and polished shoes. Everything about their appearance was neat and deliberate, from the way they walked to the way they adjusted their hat and apron before approaching us. It was only when they came closer that I realized with surprise this wasn't a woman at all. Molly, like me, was someone exploring their identity and expression in a way the outside world might not expect. The realization hit me like a wave. For the first time, I wasn't the only one. There were others on this journey too, confident, graceful, unapologetically themselves. And if they could do it, maybe I could too. Mistress Diane turned to Molly with a sharp nod. "Take Charlotte to the back and help her get ready." I made a weak attempt to protest. "I'm already wearing what Miss Rachel asked for. Look, I'll show you." I nervously unbuttoned part of my shirt to reveal the special undergarments beneath, hoping that would be enough. But neither of them reacted. Molly simply reached for my hand and tugged gently but firmly. "Come with me, please," she whispered. Her voice was so soft, I had to lean in to hear her. Up close, I noticed how pale her face looked under layers of makeup, almost ghost-like, and her eyes flicked nervously toward the door. "She'll hear you," she murmured when I started to object again. "It's better if you just go along with it." There was something in her tone, not obedience, but fear. It startled me. This didn't feel like the fantasy world I had imagined, where people willingly explored this side of themselves with trust and respect. This felt darker, more unpredictable. And yet, I let myself be guided forward. The back room looked more like a storage space than a dressing area. Boxes lined the walls, shelves overflowed with costumes and accessories, and the air was thick with the smell of oil and dust. It was cluttered, chaotic, and strangely intimidating. Molly began helping me change into the outfit Diane had prepared. Layer by layer, she adjusted the fit, pulling fabric tight and fussing over details until everything sat perfectly. Even though part of me wanted to resist, I was too stunned and too curious to stop her. Finally, she brought over the main piece, a classic, tailored uniform, similar to the one she wore. It was far more elaborate than I expected, with intricate lace and structured seams that exaggerated my figure. I stepped into it cautiously as she zipped it up. Once it was fastened, I realized with a jolt that the closure wasn't meant to be undone casually, it was locked in place. My pulse quickened. There was no turning back now. Molly wasn't done yet. She guided me to a mirror and placed a long, blonde wig over my hair, styling it so that it framed my face. Then came makeup, more dramatic than anything I'd worn before. My features shifted before my eyes, becoming softer, more theatrical. When she was finished, I barely recognized the person staring back. For the final touches, Molly added accessories, a crisp apron, gloves, and a pair of elegant heels that instantly changed the way I stood and moved. She stepped back to look at her work and, for the first time, allowed herself a small, proud smile. "Perfect," she said quietly. "You're ready." I turned toward the mirror and froze. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the awkward young man who had walked into the shop an hour earlier. It was someone new, polished, graceful, and striking in a way I had never imagined. In that moment, I felt a confusing mix of emotions: shock, disbelief, fear, and a strange, undeniable sense of possibility. Miss Diane's expression hardened as she looked me over from head to toe. Not bad for a beginner," she said coldly. "A little too pleased with yourself, perhaps." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin leather band, something between a choker and a tag, but the way she held it made it feel more like a leash. She stepped behind me and clasped it firmly around my neck. The loud click of the lock made me flinch. "I have some good news for you, Charlotte," she said, smiling without warmth. "I spoke to your mistress this afternoon. She's agreed that you'll help us for a few hours. Consider it part of the payment for that lovely new uniform. You'll work behind the counter with Molly tonight." Her eyes glinted with mischief. "Of course, you're free to leave if you wish. Though, I imagine it might be challenging to walk down the street dressed like that. People might stare. Some might even follow. Your choice." Laughter rippled through the shop. My cheeks burned as I lowered my head and walked behind the counter to stand beside Molly.